I'm Bill Case. I'm the president of the German Village Society, and this is the latest in our oral histories, and we're about to have a conversation with a man who has a dual recognition with German Village. Number one, he is one of the founding members of the society, and number two, he was on the original commission.
That's
one
right.
of the original commission members. Dick Eiselt, welcome.
Thank you.
Dick, you're an architect by training.
Yes.
I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about how you became an architect.
Well, I'm a retired architect. I've been retired for 23 years. And I became an architect because my father was an architect, and they suggested I go to architecture school and become an architect. And I really didn't want to, and he said, I'll tell you, you go ahead and do it. And if you don't like it, just quit. So I started it, and I didn't like it, but I didn't have the guts to quit. So I kept going, and I was not really getting good grades in my earlier years, and yet on my thesis I got a 4.0 on my thesis, so things started to look much better. And then I started getting quite interested in architecture.
Ohio State?
At Ohio State, yes.
Graduated in 1953?
Yes.
Tell us about your father's involvement in architecture. What kind of work he did? I found that interesting when we talked.
Well, my father did general work, but he was very heavy in industrial buildings, and he did work for the Wagner breweries and for the Franklin Brewing Company, and also for the Belmont Casket Manufacturing Company. So that's the kind of work he did.
So he was involved in some of the very breweries that are part of the history and legacy of German Village.
Oh, yes, yes.
When you got out in 1953, I understand you went to New York.
Yes, I did.
Tell us about that.
Well, I went to New York. As a matter of fact, the day I graduated, I got on a train and went directly to New York because Howard Dwight Smith, who was one of my professors, said that's the way he got started and that's the way to get started, so that's what I did.
Did you tell me that Smith helped design Ohio Stadium?
I think he was the architect for the Ohio Stadium.
And your father had some involvement in Ohio Stadium
my father worked for the Latham Company, and they were the general contractors, and my father designed the method of pouring the concrete for the stadium. And I think it probably was a slip form method, but they were not, they didn't get into it from that standpoint, but he helped out from that standpoint.
So you get on the train at Union Station downtown and go to New York?
Yes.
Did you have any appointments or anything? Or
I had no job.
Okay.
I went to the Architectural League of New York, which is sort of a club for the architects, and I took some drawings that I'd made for my father in his office. They liked what they saw, and they called a firm called Edelbaum and Webster on Madison Avenue, and they took me on right away.
You didn't enjoy New York that much?
No, I didn't. I went to New York to drink in some of the culture, but I didn't drink anything in but getting on a subway to go back and forth to work and getting my food and sleep, and that's about all I had time for. So I only lasted a couple months, and then I went back to Columbus.
You didn't work for your father, though, right away?
No, I didn't. I started to work for Frank Pickler in Columbus, and I worked for Frank for about a year, and Frank used to say, your father's an architect. He says, what's he doing, sending you over here to make mistakes here first?
Perhaps some truth to that.
Well, there might have been. It could have been.
But in the end, you ended up working with your father.
Yes, I did.
Tell us about that.
Well, I started to work with him, and then I was working for him for a couple months, I'd say. And then he said, well, we're going to have to change the name of this firm. And I said, okay. He said, we'll call it Henry Edward Eiselt and Son Architects. I said, no. I said, that's like you're running a plumbing company. I said, it's going to be Eiselt and Eiselt Architect. And he said, well, okay. So we put that on the door, and then I was at our office on the 4th floor in the Franklin Federal Building at Main and High Street. And we went from there, and then he, shortly after that, when I say that, maybe a year or so after that, he retired and I took over the entire firm.
Your career in architecture kind of took an unexpected turn.
Yes. When we had offices at Main and High, I had gotten married and I went to find a house, and I found a house on Cassidy Avenue in Bexley. And when I went in the place, the entire basement had been turned into an office for two guys that were in the contracting business, and it was just like an office downtown. And I thought, boy, this is good, because we can move our offices from Main and High into my house, which we did. And then when I was there was a restaurant down on Livingston Avenue called Burger Boy Drive-In Restaurant, and the owner was, McDonald's was coming to town, and they were going to start a new chain to compete with McDonald's. So he got a hold of, this Roy Tuggle got a hold of Milt Lustnauer, and he came over with Milt, and he'd been to see me one time all. He'd never known me before.
He didn't really know you very well.
He didn't know me at all.
Much less about your work.
When he brought Milt over, he told Milt, "This guy's a great architect," and so he didn't know what I was. But I got the project because I was in the right location.
This was the restaurant project for a hamburger place.
And then we designed buildings all over the country. I designed for BBF. We called it BBF after that. And I designed buildings, and I was registered in 31 states.
BBF took off for a good long time.
Oh yes, it did a good job. And as a matter of fact, I remember, I think it was down Refugee Road, BBF was there and came in, and McDonald was already there, and with 2 months McDonald closed down because BBF took all their business.
You'd never designed a restaurant, but Toggle said you were the greatest architect
I was
around.
an expert in anything.
So all of a sudden you became an expert in restaurant design.
Yes. And then I got a call from Eddie Grayson for York Steakhouses, and he had already cleared it with Tuggle to see if I wasn't stealing their architect, and he said no, he works for everybody. So I got that account, and then I started doing work all over the country for them.
Dick, I don't know if you know Larry Schaefer, who served on the commission after you did it, and he has almost exactly the same story about how he got involved in brokering gasoline stations in Columbus. Right? He had no knowledge, but went to a meeting much like you did, and all of a sudden he became the expert on setting up service stations. That's how it happens, I guess. So you're a Bexley guy, right? You were born and raised in Bexley,
right?
And really never lived in German Village.
No, I never lived in German Village.
You became very active civically as you moved along in your career, right?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, I was president of the American Institute of Architects Columbus chapter, and then I was also president of the Columbus Arts Council. Excuse me. And I was on the board of trustees for the Columbus Junior Theater of the Arts, and I was on several other organizations, and I was pretty busy. I don't know how I really got time to practice architecture.
And by the way, that architecture practice really took off with, I think you talked about your marketing program.
Yes, I started my own marketing program, and I would, when I was going to a certain city to do a job that I already had, I would get a telephone directory and find out where the restaurants were in that area, and then I would send them a mailing, and then I would get they would invite me to stop in and talk about something they wanted to do. So it went from a one-man office that my father had, that I ended up with 22 people in my firm.
All your civic involvement led you into contact with a fellow by the name of Frank Fetch, I understand.
Oh, absolutely.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, Frank was quite a man. Frank had been doing some house renovations in German Village before I met him, and he had bought this house on Mohawk and called me and said, would you want to come down and look at it, and maybe you could work for me on it. So I went down to look at the place, and it was a complete mess. It was horrible. It had a car parked on concrete blocks in the front yard, and it was basically falling apart. So Frank said, "Well, what do you want to do with this?" I said, "Well, the best thing you could do is tear it down." And Frank said, "Oh, no, I want to get this rehabbed so people can see what can be done with a property like this. So I don't want to tear it down. I want to make it better."
It was a pretty big house.
It was a two-story house, yeah.
And you said he paid something like $4,000
He
for
paid
it.
$4,000 for it, and I think I put about $24,000 into it. Beyond that, to do the work we were doing, we put all new windows and really brought it up to date.
That awful condition of that property was not unlike many properties in German Village at that time.
Oh, absolutely. German Village was like a slum at that time. It wasn't German Village, obviously.
You said, though, that Frank kind of had a plan to transition this area.
He did what?
He had a plan to have it look like another
absolutely.
community.
Frank says, he said, "Are you familiar with Georgetown?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Well, Georgetown was a mess at one time." And he said, "People bought the property there and improved it, and now it's a prestige place to live." And he says, "That's the way this is going to be in German Village."
Then from there, you became involved in drafting the first legislation, the first ordinance that really set up the German Village Commission.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, I knew John Young. John Young was a city attorney. And John called me and said, "We want to get together and get this ordinance done and submit it to the mayor and so forth." And I did with John. We worked on it and got a thing through and gave it to the mayor, and it was adopted.
And so this is the first time that legislatively such things as slate roofs and brick architecture began to be protected by legislation.
Oh, absolutely. You could not tear down a house in German Village after this came into effect. It was not possible. You got the house and you rehabbed it, but you couldn't tear it down.
I asked you how long that process took, and you said you didn't think it took that long.
You mean
to draft it?
No, it didn't. I think we worked for about a week or so on it.
Then, after that legislation was approved by City Council, you got a telephone call from the mayor.
Yes, I did. I got a telephone call, and he wanted to place me on the commission, and he said, "Want to know if I accepted," which I did, and that's what kicked it off.
The mayor at that time was Mayor Westlake.
Yeah, Austin Westlake.
Did you have any prior involvement with him, or?
I didn't. I just knew he was mayor. That's all I knew.
So, lo and behold, now you're on the very first German Village Commission.
That's right.
Which, as we sit here today in 2013, was almost exactly 50 years ago.
Yes.
Where did you meet at first? Where were your first meetings? I think you said it was City Hall?
It was a City Hall.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
And you were, as is true now, there were certain spots on the commission reserved for professional people who would have some knowledge of things.
Yes.
And you were one of those.
Yeah, well, it was necessary that one of the members on the commission be an architect, so I was the one they picked.
I asked you, we have the names of some of the original people that were on the commission, and I mentioned Professor Tilley,
Yeah.
and who is listed, and you don't have any specific recollection of Professor Tilley except one.
No, the only one I have is he was my professor at the university, at the Ohio State University School of Architecture. But I think he probably came on after I left the commission.
You do remember Mr. Kenny, who's listed.
Yes, I do. Gebhard Kenny was his name, and he was the founder and the president of the Columbus Plastics Company, which was located on Mount Vernon Avenue over on the west side.
And I think there's a certain type of product that they made.
Yes, at that time they made a product called Lustoware, which was containers to put in the refrigerator when you want to refrigerate food or leftover or something like that. It was something like Tupperware.
You also remember the first chairman, Fritz Kaiser.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell us about him.
Well, I first met Fritz Kaiser back when I was in at my office at Main and High. And I was quite young. I used to go out and visit my father at the office, and I knew him for a long period of time. But that's how I knew him. And he was from Germany, and he spoke very broken English. And so that's about all I can tell you.
I think we talked a little bit about your early days on the commission, and you said that when you get a case in front of you, you were trying to be very vigilant in preserving what you saw as the emerging integrity of German Village.
Absolutely.
Tell us about your philosophy as a commissioner.
Well, I mean, I don't care if I knew him or didn't know the person coming before me. If I wanted to say, no, you can't have what you're asking for, I would say it. I didn't favor anyone. I just favored the German village, and it had to be something that would fit into the village and do well for it.
And you don't remember exactly how long you served.
No, I don't.
But it was for a good period of time.
Yes, it was for several years.
Did you begin to see an improvement in the condition of the area?
Yes, but nothing like today. It did what Frank said. It would take off and be another Georgetown.
You do remember some of what was going on in the area in the 60s. I think you said you patronized the Central Market, which was later torn down with I-70.
Oh, yes.
Or I guess actually that's where the bus station is now.
Yeah.
But you do remember the Central Market.
Yes, my mother used to take us. I have a twin sister. My mother would take us shopping there every Saturday. And one thing I remember is one of the meat purveyors there would always reach into the counter and get 2 wieners and reach over the counter and give each one of the twins a wiener to eat. Anytime we went there.
That's a great memory.
That became a ritual.
Now another place that folks who are new to the area may not remember, they know it as the Barcelona restaurant, but you may have known it as Dibel's.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about Dibel's. You have a connection with Dibel's.
Well, yes, I have a connection. I have an uncle, or I had an uncle, who played the banjo down at Dibel's. And I don't remember the lady's name, but that was also...
Esther?
Esther, that's what his name was.
Right.
And, but he played banjo down there, Adolf Eiselt. And so that's my connection with it.
And you saw Adolf in action down there?
Oh, absolutely. I took my kids down one time and let them see him.
You also were a founding member of the society. How did you get in? Did you come to do that?
I was what?
You were a founding member of the German Village Society.
Well,
did Frank get you involved in that?
I think probably, I don't know whether Frank did or not. I don't remember who got me involved there.
But you're still a member today. You're one of the originals.
Yes, yes.
Let's see. We can edit this later, so I'm just trying to see what if anything I've missed.
About the Metacore maybe? Or?
Yeah. You were also a Menicore member.
Yes, I was. My father was a member, and then I later became a member also.
Well, Eiselt's a good German name.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
You said you weren't a singer, though.
No, I can't sing.
You were an eater.
I was an eater and drinker.
Did you ever do any work yourself in the village, other than the 2 homes for? You said there was a second home you did for Frank after the first.
Yes, Frank called me and wanted to have a house built for himself, and he said he wanted to have a garage on the first floor and then living space above it, and it was right across from the other one on Mohawk, and so I developed that for him.
You realize that today that would never be approved by the present commission. They require...
Maybe it's so beautiful, it probably... Maybe.
Right, that's right. Well, that's what I think all the applicants say when they come in front of the commission. Now, my wife Lisa Case is with us doing the video today, and she's on the current commission, and she can speak for the commission if need be on that. Well, let me ask you this, Dick. Looking back on your contribution to the German Village and the German Village Society. What makes you proudest of your involvement?
Well, I feel fortunate that I had the opportunity, for one thing, because it was a great opportunity to be offered that, and by accepting it, you see what came of it.
It's a great place, and we're trying to preserve the memories, and I'm glad you could share them with us.
Well, thank you.
And thank you very much, and we enjoyed speaking to you very much.
You're welcome.